Hello, Mary Tess Rooney.
Hello, Shanti Joy Gold.
Ah, welcome to the podcast for women with three names. No, welcome to Stories We Haven't Shared,
Love it.
which is a campfire-style interview series where underrepresented people share stories about navigating into the already complicated career landscape. And for this very first episode, although I will traditionally be doing the interviewing, I will be the interviewee. It feels only right that if I'm going to talk to other people about their experiences, that I'm open to going first. So here we are. And I just want to say I could not be more excited to have you as my co-host on this journey, since you've been such a big part of my journey in real life, so to speak. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for making me a part of this beautiful community that you're creating. So, before we step into your story, because obviously you have a story that will inspire and resonate with the listeners that are tuning in right now. So, we're so grateful for the ears and the eyes if they're part of this video experience as well. But help us just get a visual and help us get grounded. Who are the people that are surrounding this campfire?
Yeah, that's a great question. The people surrounding this campfire are anyone who considers themselves a part of an underrepresented community. And in addition to people in underrepresented communities, and when I say that, it's basically minority communities, and then anyone who is an ally, anyone who is supportive of these communities and has curiosity, wants to understand more, wants to get sort of an inside view
Yeah.
and kind of hold hands, so to speak, with the community. And my hope is that within the underrepresented communities, that there's some additional opportunities for common ground. Not that there isn't already, but there can never be enough.
Yeah.
And again, just to open it up to those who are supportive, who we would traditionally call allies.
Yeah. I love that. And at the end of the day, we all benefit and we all rise when we can relate to someone. We've all had or we've been in the situation where we're marginalized or misrepresented or unrepresented. And so having these stories that we haven't shared front and center and being able to learn from each other or just have empathy, like what a powerful collective you are gathering here so that we can all just embrace the human element and then also be better advocates or allies as we move through this world in whatever career path or whatever different sort of journeys we go on. So, with that in mind, I know that each episode you're going to give your guests the opportunity to share in what ways have you realized that this conversation is so important.
I'm a white, gay, cisgender woman. I've been out with the people who know me best for quite some time, including in my professional life for close to the past 20 years. But there's a broader world out there that just wasn't aware.
Mm,
And as I changed that and I came out, I had some epiphanies that made me realize that there were probably other people in a similar situation, and that those stories could be very important to healing, connecting, to share, both for people in similar situations as well as for people who want to understand more about what it's like.
yeah, I love that. And speaking of professionally, like, do you want to share a little bit about your professional journey and so that others, again, have a more in depth look at how you can relate?
Yeah. So I spent the majority of my career in sales leadership, specifically primarily in the media industry in the New York market. And I really loved it. I was very fortunate in my career. And then for the moment, long story short, I made a pivot outside of media. I discovered the world of professional coaching, which, having been in media for my whole life, essentially, I didn't even know existed. So I was very excited when I learned that it did. Since working with individuals on who they were, what motivates and drives them, their strengths, their areas of opportunity, really working with individuals to get them along on the path that they see for themselves professionally and in some
Mm,
cases personally was very rewarding. And then bringing all of these individuals together to create a cohesive team was another layer of that I really enjoyed. So when I found out about professional coaching, I was like, wow, that's the best part of what I've done. And it's its own thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I got immersed in that world, including being the director of admissions, which was essentially the director of sales for one of the top professional coach training schools, which really merged the two worlds for me and helped me get immersed in the professional coaching world. And from there, I just had an epiphany and I decided to open my own professional coaching business called Grow with a Pro, where I help LGBTQ plus and underrepresented people confidently thrive in their careers by being fully themselves. So really trying to bring my lived experience professionally and personally together with the work that I'm doing now.
Yay! That's so
Yay.
exciting and so needed. And I love that you came to that realization. And when we kicked off the episode, you kind of shared that we have been supporting each other in our own self-employed journey, and we both were in corporate America. And I know that when you really honed in on this idea of being a professional coach and running your own business, Grow with the Pro, you also sort of were trying to dial in on the audience that really resonated with you the most. So do you want to give us a little insight into that journey?
Yeah. It wasn't a straight line, pun intended. When I first realized I wanted to be a coach, I didn't know who I wanted to most serve, sort of put my finger on a map, so to speak, and chose something. And then did a pretty deep dive over the next almost probably 9-10 months of just really being thoughtful about it in various ways, including intensely thoughtful about it for a period of probably a month. A lot of that was looking back at my life story and trying to piece together, again, what's my lived experience and how do I align that with my passion for what I'm doing? And therefore, who do I want to serve? So I landed for a hot minute on coaching media sales leaders since I have that experience. And again, I was very fortunate in my career, so I thought that might be it. And I sat down one day to write the website copy for it. And the words were fine. Like I was okay with the words, but I realized I wasn't really connecting with the words. Now it
Yeah.
was kind of late in the afternoon. I'm not an afternoon person. So I thought, all right, it's okay. It's late. Just put it aside and come back to it tomorrow and see how it feels. In the meantime, a friend of mine sent me a referral, a coaching referral for a woman who was non-white, so clearly from a different nationality. I didn't know which one. And from kind of context clues that I'd received, appeared likely to be gay. And I thought, wow, I'm so excited. I'm so glad my
Yeah.
friend sent this person my way. I can't wait to meet her. I'm really looking forward to this. That's the end of that day. And then the next morning I woke up and it was just like a light bulb. I saw my kind of struggle with connecting to the copy I was writing about media sales leaders.
Yeah.
Nothing against media sales leaders. I love you guys. And then this kind of reaction I had to speaking with a gay woman of some nationality. And I just knew immediately that was it.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened. I saw it, felt it, knew it in kind of an instant the next morning.
Yeah. And what's cool about probably the people listening to this podcast is they're also wanting to connect with their people. I mean, we all have these amazing skills and abilities. You have a breadth of experience, and you could coach in a number of different facets, a number of different industries, because again, in advertising, you are working with small businesses or medium-sized businesses, large businesses, whatever it is. And so you're exposing yourself to all of these different industries, right? And so you have worn a lot of hats. You could wear hats in coaching. But what I love about that story is the fact that you recognized your own energy alignment and you were like, oh, I cannot wait to speak to her. Like there was multiple connections, multiple just personal awakening that said, okay, this is the client. Like if I can find more of these clients, and then fast forward, you are taking it to this next level and saying, I want the clients and I want to be of service in a different way. Hence, stories we haven't shared. So I love
Here
that
we
you
are.
have really just honed in on who you are, what lights you up, what your message is, and also you're attracting them so that people listening, if they need support, you're offering this community. So kudos to you.
Thank you for that. You summarized that much better than I could have. So thank you.
We are in this together, my friend. So,
Yes, we
what about personally? Because you're multifaceted on just your interests as well. So, share a little bit for us there.
Sure. Yeah, my wife and I have been together 28 years, which I say out loud and can't believe. We met and spent the first chapter of our time together in Manhattan, in New York, which was a real blast. And then we started to migrate on the weekends out to a small lake community in New Jersey. And over the course of the next couple of years, just the scales, as we were kind of evaluating where we wanted to be, tipped toward the lake. And so we moved out here full time. And that's well over 20 years ago now. And it really kind of fits along with the things that we most enjoy, being outdoors, boating, kayaking. I've learned to be a griller. I love grilling. And music's a huge part of my life, which you'll see in this podcast. Just being a fan of music of all kinds, as well as I play guitar, just kind of a campfire strummer, guitarist, and
I like that. Well,
really
that's
love
you
doing
on
that.
the intro and outro too, right?
It is.
I
That's
love it.
me. And yeah, and that was the first time I actually wrote guitar music, so that was kind of fun as well to play around with. And boring. I love spending quality time with family and friends. And if we can't be outside because it's the winter, then you'll find us inside by the fireplace. And again, there will be music happening. So
There's a lot of fireplaces happening. So, I think some good
yeah,
stories get shared, whether indoors or
that's right.
outdoors. But the theme is around the campfire. So,
No
with
doubt.
that in mind, remind our listeners again the goals of sharing stories as we sit around the campfire, and then lead us into your story that you want to share today.
Sure. Yeah, the goal is really for people to feel less alone, more seen. I've come to realize for myself, and as I'm starting to talk to people for this podcast, that when things happen to us, when we're kind of navigating as outsiders and we have an experience, and it may be kind of an uncomfortable one or a challenging one, or maybe just a different one, but doesn't necessarily need to be big and heavy, but different. I think that we don't want to dwell in those moments because we really just want to be, uh, for lack of better terms, is normal, right? We just want to have a normal day, do a normal thing, and move on. And especially depending on the degree to which that moment maybe was difficult, I think we kind of tuck those moments away, potentially without being aware that we're doing it. So we're
Mm-hmm.
tucking them away from kind of our own awareness to some degree, and definitely from sharing them. So the more that we can kind of bring these stories out, I just realized if I have them, other people probably do too. And I think
Yeah.
there's value in sharing them and creating some just baseline comfort and understanding and awareness, both within underrepresented communities, as well as, again, for the people who want to understand more about the slightly different path that we take.
Yeah. And just being sensitive, right? We all
Yeah.
struggle with very unique things because we're all unique people. And when you hear someone else's reflection, there's power in that because, again, when you're in it, you say a lot of times when you're in the throes of it, you're emotionally triggered or you're responding to so many different aspects of what is unraveling while all maintaining some level of professionalism or what's expected from a exterior standpoint. And so I love that you are having people reflect back and share their story so that there's a little bit of unpacking, but then there's also a little bit of pay it forward, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can
Definitely.
this story be of service to someone else to find the right language or to find the right empathy or to find the right navigation or strategy or just to find the right, like, I don't know, comical side of it? Because some of it, while it was painful in the moment, it could have been a little bit, I don't know, humorous in hindsight, maybe
Oh, yeah.
some
Yeah,
aspects
yeah,
of it. So,
definitely. Yeah, I'm
um,
glad you mentioned that because, well, just to kind of give a little bit more context, when I figured out my niche, I went ahead and did a post on LinkedIn that talked about my niche. And in the process of doing that, shared two of my, what I call coming out at work stories.
Mm.
And to me, that was coming out to the LinkedIn universe was the coming out part. That was the broader audience that I had not yet shared with. So it felt like yet another leap of faith. What was interesting and what actually directly inspired this podcast was two friends of mine, good friends, good people, smart people, curious people, open-minded people. When I shared these two coming out at work stories, responded by saying, I had absolutely no idea that you went through that. And then they said, thank you for telling the stories. It's really important for people to hear them. I was glad to hear it. How else would I know? It never even occurred to me that you or anyone else was having to navigate in these ways. And so it was interesting because I sat with it for a while and I thought, part of what I thought is, wow, that's where these stories getting tucked away really hit home for me. And I thought, what's my part in that? Because if these two people, these curious, kind, open-minded, just lovely people had no idea I went through it, do I own part of that?
Yeah.
And I realized that, yeah, I probably own most of it. I didn't share the stories, right?
Yeah.
I just didn't want to dwell. I just wanted to keep moving. And so that's specifically what sparked it. And I will say there's something else you mentioned. I did, in my own journey, feel quite alone. Obviously, I had my wife, but I think together we felt like we were kind of covering uncharted ground, which obviously wasn't the case, but we really didn't have a community. I feel very much that my journey is my journey and it unfolded exactly the way it should have. Having said that, if I can help create some community and save other people some time and give them some extra grace to move through it, then I'm thrilled. That's definitely a part of what I'm hoping to do with the guests.
Awesome. I love that. And I know the listeners are probably saying, yes, I'm looking forward to those stories too. So as we huddle around the campfire and you're strumming on the guitar and doing the things with our little s'mores, take us to a moment in time that our listeners can relate to.
Well, so I'm going to share the same stories that I shared in that LinkedIn post, my coming out at work stories. So basically, my relationship with my wife started about 10 years prior. We were working at a company that I've described as kind of the Wild West or picture Mad Men, whatever you want to call it. But it definitely didn't feel safe. It wasn't safe. That's kind of where it all started.
You were pioneers, like, because you're literally
Yeah,
navigating some
yeah.
uncharted territory. Yeah.
I suppose, right? The timing was definitely different. There were a lot of people that had pioneered before, but it was still not as accepted as perhaps it is today, although there's a lot going on today too. So I spent the better part of the next 10 years kind of contorting, hiding, ducking in really uncomfortable ways what was going on. And that's probably an entire conversation for another day. But just imagine that something that's so important and central to your life is something that you have to hide. Yet I don't have a poker face. Lying is against my DNA and the way I was raised. So I was in this very, very uncomfortable space for the better part of 10 years, trying to split the difference. And when I arrived at my next job, I said, this is it, I'm done. This is my chance now that I'm in a new space to just be out with it, literally. And so I didn't do it the minute I walked in, but probably about 6 months in, once people had gotten to know me, I was like, okay, let's get her done. So the sales team I worked with had a sales assistant, lovely, lovely woman. I decided I would tell her first. So I called her in, and what I wanted to say was, here's my truth, and I feel it's important to share, and I'm just glad that you're here. And instead, a stream of words, can't remember a thing I said, but it was like the most epic ramble of all times. I don't know if you remember early Ellen DeGeneres, but she used to kind of ramble, and then she'd try to fix it, and she'd go in deeper, and it was just this like ramble spiral, and that's exactly what I was doing. And as I'm talking, the sales assistant is just looking at me, and her eyes just keep getting gradually a little bit wider and a little bit wider. And I don't think it's the news that I'm sharing. I think it's the way I'm doing it.
Yeah.
It just gets worse and worse. And honestly, at some point, I just realized there was no easy, safe, good landing for this. So I just stopped talking and said, you know what, it's okay. You can go. And that was it. And she left, and I put my head in my hands and just sit there for a bit. But it was really about as clumsy as it could possibly have been. And she never said a word the entire time. It was great. So that was the first one. And I didn't necessarily think that the word got out from that point. I'm sure she had no idea what to do with what had just been dumped on her. So I wanted to then tell my boss, who was also a lovely human. And so my wife was having some knee surgery. And I thought, all right, well, here's my chance. I'm going to need to take some time off to be with her. And so I'll use that as the reason. So I kind of reviewed what I did the previous time and said, okay, I'm going to really think about my words and I'm going to get grounded and strong and I'm going to call her and I'm going to tell her. So I called her up and I did not know she had the day off, which will be relevant in a minute. So she picks up and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that my partner, which was the best word I had at the time, my partner's having some knee surgery coming up and I'm going to be needing to take some time off. So I just wanted to let you know and make sure that it was okay. I wanted to clear it with you. And in my mind, I'm like, I did it. I didn't ramble. I said it. It's done. And then she says, I'm sorry. I'm at the mall with my daughter. I couldn't hear you. Could you please speak up and repeat yourself?
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I first couldn't believe that this was happening. And then I said, oh, okay. So now instead of what I did previously, which was probably in a very quiet voice, I started shouting it, the same story, like at the top of my lungs. So I got it out there. I'm pretty sure I came out to everyone in the office because I was screaming it at the top of my lungs. And that was it. Those are my two stories. And it's kind of falls into you can't make this stuff up, right? Both were very clumsy in their own way. And it was also kind of perfectly weird and good in its own way. I did it, and that was the important part. By the way, she was wonderful about it. She didn't skip a beat. And it really did just become known after that. And no one at the company skipped a beat.
Yeah. And then, but then you also then had the coming out on LinkedIn too, right? So it's like you
I
again
did.
have this.
And yeah, no, that was beautiful. That was a little different because it was in a very different place. This is a handful of months ago. I mean, I'm at a point now, if I meet someone, I just very easily say, blah, 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 my wife, blah. I mean, it's not even a thing. So it's been some time. And I think the post was in that same spirit. And I think people could sense just kind of the place I was coming to them with the news from, which is a very comfortable place. And the catharsis of just finally saying it in a bigger way.
Yeah.
And the response from people was just beautiful, comments, etc. And that was very heartening. And I think just another affirmation that I'm on the right path with all of this.
Yeah. And so as you sort of look at those two different time frames and you reflect back, like what are some of your big takeaways from who you are and how you showed up in both, or some of your reflection points?
Yeah. The first thing I have to note, and you mentioned it earlier, is just the humor of it. I mean, honestly, at this point, looking back, if I need a laugh, I just think of those stories, or I just find someone to tell the stories to, because it's actually really funny.
Yeah.
I think that when I had those coming out at work conversations the first time, my conversations 100% reflected how I was feeling inside, right? The first time, this kind of jumble, this ramble, this like crazy energy, there was definitely guilt and uncertainty. It was 100% reflected in the way in which I communicated.
And was there fear and anxiety too, Shanti? Like what are the other?
Yeah, I forgot anxiety. Thank you. That's one of my favorites. Yes, there was. Definitely. Yeah, no, it was scary for me. And anxiety was enormous around it. I mean, not to state the obvious, but you don't know until you share it how it's going to be received. You want to think it'll be received in a certain way. And I got to know these people a bit and felt comfortable enough with a little bit that I knew them, but anything was possible. So yeah, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And in the second conversation, I was able to calm myself and prepare better. But even when I think about that, I went from one extreme to the other. I'm sure I spoke to her in kind of a whisper. It wasn't just that she was at the mall with her daughter, right? I'm sure I was being very quiet about it as I was communicating it. And then when I had to repeat it, I think it brought out the frustration. Didn't say it in an angry way, but there was a frustration there, definitely, that I think came out in the second time I communicated to her. What I might wish for other people going through something similar is the awareness of how the communication was happening and what that might be reflecting about what was going on for them. There's how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So there was definitely the potential for an awareness moment for me to say, hey, it's great that you did this. Like, good job, kid.
Yeah.
And what's with the way that came out? Yeah. And to get curious about it. I didn't do that at the time. Again, just kind of tucked it and kept going. So I think that that's just a point of reflection for me, is being aware of how we're communicating, how we're showing up, and what that might be saying about what might be going on at a deeper level. And there's opportunity in that to explore if you want to, if you're ready to.
I love it.
This is a lot of years later. I'm losing track. It's a lot of years later to where I could finally get to a level of comfort where I could do what I did with LinkedIn and do it in a very kind of grounded, peaceful way. Yeah, that's been the journey. It's all perfect the way it is. If something in what I'm saying or in this podcast as it continues can help people shorten that journey or be more graceful in that journey for themselves, and that's a great thing.
Yeah. What has opened up for you as a result of you becoming more vulnerable with those audiences?
I mean, everything. I think it's the first time in my life where there's absolutely nothing that I have to think about holding back or running through a filter. So much of my life, there has been some degree decreasing over time, but of keeping a piece of me out of sight. I do think a lot about this idea of running things through a filter, where it's like, okay, well, I'm about to say this. Should I say this? Is it safe to say this? How will it be received if I say this? I'm throwing away the filter. Just showing up as myself. And that's very freeing, but I feel people respond to it. And I don't know how to explain that other than the more comfortable I get, the more comfortable I feel that I make other people. And in terms of the work that I do, I think people are much more able to connect to what it is I actually do, why I'm doing it, how I might be able to help them, because it's just coming from a place of purity.
Yeah.
And the more I lean into that and just let that happen, the easier I find my conversations and the more impact I feel like I'm able to have in my conversations.
I love that. And something else you said is so interesting, because it's that awareness that, yes, sometimes we have this filter because we're afraid of being judged, or we have anxiety about being judged. But at some point, it's like, if we're surrounding ourselves with people that are judging us instead of supporting and rallying around the campfire with us, it's like, take a hike, buddy. Or,
well, there's that too. It helps you kind of weed things out more quickly in that respect. For sure.
There are so many different things opening up for your own personal self-worth and evolution, and knowing who you are. And then from an external standpoint, there's also this opening up to people that maybe we thought that they would judge us, and instead they surprised and delighted us, or, you know what I mean? There's all of these
Right.
things that we don't realize what we are anticipating or expecting from someone else versus what actually happens, right?
Yeah.
And then unpacking that. So that's pretty cool. As we again sit around this campfire, I love the visual of you and strumming the guitar. What else do you want the listeners to know about your experience, or what you aspire to happen as a result of this podcast?
We've talked a couple times about how intertwined our journeys have been of late. And when I first told you about the idea for the podcast, you just kind of hit me with a stream of imagery that really became part of the fiber of the podcast. You said, oh, that makes so much sense. You love sharing stories and you love playing the guitar. And I just picture you around a campfire and creating that sort of atmosphere. And I mean, I still have the piece of paper where you said all of that to me, and I will keep it forever, because I knew for sure I wanted to do this, but the how will it feel, how will it look part just that was immediate when you said that, and I'm so grateful. So thank you. That's really it, right? Let's hang out. Let's share stories. Some of them will be funny. Some of them will probably be a little bit difficult or heavy. Some of them will be light, inspirational. We're going to run the gamut together. And I think that's really what I'm looking to create, is a space to share comfortably in a safe space. If you picture a warm glow of a campfire, that feel, and where we can listen with an open heart and speak with an open heart, and just create that opportunity for connection and awareness. I believe that after awareness is the potential for acceptance, right? So if the awareness that we're creating leads to some additional acceptance, then that's like the icing on the cake.
Well, and I also know you well enough to know you're all about empowering people. So I imagine that there'll be a lot of resources that are shared too, like resources that you wish you had at the time, or resources that one of your guests say, okay, I did not know this. I had to learn this the hard way, but hey, here are great resources for anyone that are listening, and yet to have this conversation so that they can recreate a story that they'll share later on in life, and it'll be a different story.
Absolutely. Yes. That's another big piece of it. I'm already speaking to some amazing people, and their stories and their resources, I think, are going to provide a lot of value as well.
It's exciting. Okay, so music. Let's get down to the like campfire where we're just strumming and talking music or singing songs. Like, what is a song that you wish you could just put in a time capsule that you want everyone to connect with, and why is that song so meaningful to you?
This will be a common, consistent question on the podcast, and I'm lovingly calling this segment, "It's my podcast, so there will be music." It's my podcast, so there's going to be music. But beyond that, much like stories, I feel that music is a universal language that has the power to really heal and bond and unite and bring people together. So in addition to, I just want to do it, I hope that there's a lot of that kind of healing and unification that comes from it. My song is the Indigo Girls. It's Ghost. I do want to say, as far as the Indigo Girls go, I'm going to say two things. One is, I love music. I love all kinds of music. If you're watching the video, you're going to see my hands like up really high. So there's the Indigo Girls, my hands up at the top of the screen. And then there's everyone else, and that's a little bit down. Right. So they're in their own category, and then I can talk passionately about the rest of what's out there. I also realize that's very gay. So while we're on that topic, just to get it out of the way, yes, my wife and I also have a cat and matching Subarus. So I get it. I see it. I hate being a stereotype, but it is what
You're
it is,
owning it, though. I mean, at least
so
you're
just
owning
getting that
it.
all out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally owning it. Yeah, I'm good with it.
That's cool.
So Ghost was released in 1992. I was in college and just coming back from having been abroad for a semester. The album was released while I was away, and I couldn't get my hands on it, so I came back eagerly. Rites of Passage is one of the best albums of all times. And so Ghost is pretty spectacular lyrically. I'm going to give you a little bit of the lyrics. And then they always do harmonies, but the harmonies in this song are kind of haunting, a little dissonant, but beautiful. And there's a build to the song that's beautiful. There's orchestration involved. So there's a beautiful build of the orchestration. There's back and forth kind of singing and playing off of each other in addition to the harmonies. And it just takes you on a ride musically and lyrically. The start of the song, okay, so here it is. Here are the lyrics at the beginning. There's a letter on the desktop I dug out of a drawer, the last truce we ever came to from our adolescent war. And I start to feel the fever from the warm air through the screen. You come regular like seasons shadowing my dreams. So if you open a book and you're like, oh, you got me, right? So it basically takes you through this journey of unrequited love, a relationship that continues to haunt them over a period of time, and all of the emotional stuff that goes along with that. And I was definitely at an angsty time in my life.
Yeah.
So anything that tapped into like big feelings for me was really cathartic. And I don't know, it's just beautiful. It's a beautifully written, orchestrated, musically designed song.
It's gorgeous. It's really, you can feel your emotional connection to it and the energy, and again, just I have a good visual of you at that time in 1992 and just where we are in life. Like, it takes you back, but it also still resonates today. Like, that's a song that you can continue to come back to. And if you had it on a loop, or and as everyone that's listening, like, I'm going to go on to Spotify and listen to that song. And then again, I'll have a deeper connection with you. And I'll also probably think back to in 1992 where I was in my journey. And I was just graduating high school and getting ready to go to college. And so we're all in these big transitions of life. And song does bring us together again as community. So I love that, whether it's with this podcast or with your passion for music, the common thread is all about connection, about feeling seen, being understood, and really creating an understanding on a deeper human level in wherever we are, or however we are showing up, or the world is perceiving us, right? Because that's some of the stories that we haven't shared, has little to do with us and how the external world is reacting to our different choices or paths in life. And so thank you for creating this podcast. Thank you for being your bright light and just elevating everyone else in humanity. And how do you want to wrap this up? Because this is like your show, man.
All right. Well, first of all, you mentioned Spotify. I will be creating a Spotify playlist because this will be a feature on every episode. So we'll kick off the playlist with Ghost and see what gets added to it over time. Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of my journey in general and being here today with me. I treasure you. And when I thought about who could possibly do this with me and who was at the top of my list, it was you. And when you said yes, then that was just like the best. So thank you for being here. I would love for you to share. You have a book, Heart Value, and you have a podcast, True Stride. I'd love you to share a little bit about those if you don't mind.
Yes. Heart Value, my book, was published in 2021. And that book is about really understanding what lights you up on that energetic and emotional level. And then surrounding yourself with people that appreciate you for who you truly are and what value you share. Because we all have value that we share that lights us up. And then we have that value that we share that pleases others but makes us cringe inside. And so, what a gift to ourselves and to others when we can share value that comes from our heart and that lights us up. And so, Heart Value is all about my own stories that I shared for my own awakening and how I kind of came to realize that this was important to me. And also witnessing other people, because value is that tricky thing where we can get overlooked and ignored or outmaneuvered by someone more politically savvy. So, for me, value became this really big topic about how to be seen, understood, and heard for our value, but then also to take it to that next level and say, no, I'm going to share what feels right in my heart. And the rest of it, you can pay me a lot of money, but it still is not what is calling me. So that's Heart Value. And then my podcast, True Stride, we just did episode 200. So I'm pretty stoked about that. And that podcast is all about each of us aligning with our true stride. So we all have our own unique stride, and we know when we're in it and we know when we're not. And so during those episodes, we go on what I call wise walks, where we self-reflect, we ask ourselves questions so that we can ground and say, okay, like, how do I feel about this? What choices do I want to make as a result? And what actions am I going to take in order to step a little bit closer to what feels aligned to my true stride? So yeah, it's been pretty fun.
That's fantastic. Well, that's why you have an open seat every single day at this campfire, because everything that you stand for and you've shared from your heart with the world aligns perfectly with what we're doing here. Beautiful. Well, thank you again. I think that brings us to the end of the very first episode of Stories We Haven't Shared. I believe that stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by the campfire with us today. Until next time, be well. Thank you.
Good job. See you, everybody.